Every offshore account he had relied upon was now empty. Years of hidden funds had vanished. His phone buzzed with constant alerts. Access denied. Transfer failed. Accounts suspended. What the hell is happening? He barked into his phone, his composure shattered. Fix this. The setting sun cast golden rays across the polished marble floors of the Sullivan Mansion's modernist living room. Lawrence Sullivan stood still, his tall frame mirrored in the same reflection where his wife, Patricia, was adjusting her dress. The red fabric hugged her curves tightly, the neckline plunging far lower than what any respectable corporate wife would wear to a merger announcement. Lawrence studied her with the same meticulous attention that had made him one of Silicon Valley's most formidable CEOs. At 45, he still carried the commanding presence of someone who had mastered both his physical fitness through years of martial arts and his sharp intellect, which had helped build Sullivan Technologies into a cybersecurity empire. "You know how important tonight is," he said, his voice deep and carrying the quiet authority that had become his trademark. "The merger announcement requires a certain level of professionalism. That dress sends the wrong message." Patricia's fingers lingered on the fabric as she smoothed it over her hips, doing so with deliberate slowness. "It's always about your image, isn't it, Lawrence?" She reached for her lipstick and added another layer of crimson. "God forbid, I want to feel beautiful for once. Not everything revolves around Sullivan Technologies," she added. The words hung in the air like poison, triggering something inside Lawrence's mind. As CEO of the world's leading cybersecurity firm, he had built his career on detecting patterns, always looking for the smallest anomaly that could indicate a breach. Lately, his personal life had become full of anomalies. Unexplained absences that were always longer than promised. Phone calls that ended abruptly when he entered a room. Personal training sessions that stretched late into the evening. Credit card charges for hotels in the city where they lived. New jewelry she claimed to have had for years. Instead of responding to her barb, Lawrence checked his phone. A message from Chris Berger, his head of security, confirmed what he had feared. His private team was in position. He had hired Chris 8 years ago, recognizing in the former Special Forces operator the same ruthless efficiency he valued in himself. Where Lawrence was subtle steel, Chris was raw iron. Effective, unyielding, and absolutely loyal. "I need to handle some things at the office before the gala," Lawrence said, adjusting his platinum cufflinks. A 5th anniversary gift from Patricia that now felt more like a mockery. "I'll meet you there." Patricia barely acknowledged him, too absorbed in her own preparation. Her indifference was new, or perhaps it was only now that Lawrence was allowing himself to see it. As he left the room, he activated a secure line to Chris. "Begin Protocol 7, he ordered. "Full surveillance, no limitations. I want eyes and ears on everything." "Sir," Chris's voice came through with a note of concern. "That level of monitoring is unprecedented. The resources required." "Do it," Lawrence interrupted, his voice leaving no room for negotiation. "You have complete authorization. And Chris, this stays between us." Lawrence descended the curved staircase of his home, passing family portraits that now seemed like nothing more than elaborate props in a stage play. He had built this life on a foundation of integrity and family values. Sullivan Technologies was not just another tech company. It was a legacy he intended to pass down to his children. Now, as he watched his wife prepare for what she thought was just another corporate gala, Lawrence felt the ground shifting beneath him. His Tesla sat waiting in the circular driveway. The black surface of the Tesla reflected the sunset like obsidian. As Lawrence slid behind the wheel, another message from Chris appeared on his secure phone. "Initial surveillance active. You need to see this." The Sullivan Technologies corporate headquarters loomed above the San Francisco skyline, its glass and steel structure a monument to Lawrence's vision. But tonight, instead of heading to the executive floor, Lawrence descended 3 levels below ground to a secure room. The room was lined with monitors, each displaying multiple live camera feeds. Lawrence focused on one in particular, his wife Patricia at the gala. She had made her entrance 20 minutes ago, the red dress drawing the exact kind of attention she had intended. Lawrence watched her interaction with growing coldness as she gravitated toward Herman Black, whom he had considered his best friend. High-resolution cameras and directional microphones picked up their conversation. "Come here often, stranger?" Patricia's voice was crisp and clear as she sidled up to Herman at the bar. Her hand brushed his arm in a gesture too familiar for Lawrence's comfort. Herman's fingers traced her waist, hidden from the crowd by the position of the bar. "You're playing a dangerous game tonight, Pat. That dress." Lawrence still suspects nothing, she whispered, leaning close enough that her lips nearly brushed his ear. "The shell companies are in place. Once the merger goes through next week, everything changes. The accounts are ready. Sandy confirmed the last transfers yesterday. It's perfect." Lawrence is so busy protecting the company from external threats, he never thought to look inside his own home. Lawrence's fingers tightened around the edge of his desk as Chris entered with a tablet, his face grim. "Sir, our team has uncovered something bigger than an affair. You need to see this." Chris handed over the tablet, and the evidence unfolded across multiple screens, each revelation more damaging than the last. The merger with Jared Norton's tech firm, Lawrence had thought, was an expansion opportunity. Instead, it was an elaborate trap to hollow out Sullivan Technologies from the inside. Patricia wasn't just having an affair with Herman. She was the mastermind of a conspiracy that involved not just Herman, but Norton, and even Lawrence's own brother, Guillermo. "There's more," Chris said, his voice steady but strained as he pulled up another set of files. "Your daughter's recent behavioral issues, the declining grades, the rebellion, the sudden hostility toward you. We found evidence that Mrs. Sullivan has been deliberately sabotaging your relationship with both children." Surveillance footage flashed across the screens, showing Patricia in careful conversation with Mandy's teachers, planting seeds of doubt about Lawrence's commitment to his family. Text messages revealed how she had manipulated situations and staged incidents to drive a wedge between father and children. She had even intercepted and altered messages between Lawrence and his son Bill, who was away at college. "Show me everything," Lawrence commanded, his voice cold and unwavering, the calm before the storm. Every detail, every player, every angle. For the next hour, they pieced together a conspiracy that had been brewing for years. Patricia hadn't just betrayed their marriage. She'd meticulously orchestrated a complete infiltration of Lawrence's life. The cameras continued to capture her at the gala, laughing and dancing, unaware that she was celebrating what she believed was her imminent victory. As the night stretched into the early hours, Lawrence plunged deeper into encrypted servers and hidden accounts. With each discovery, another betrayal crystallized in data, another fracture in the foundation of trust he had built his life upon. His brother, Guillermo, had been running ghost projects through the R&D department, siphoning millions through fake research initiatives. The money trail led to offshore accounts, hidden but not impervious to Lawrence's resources. Herman's betrayal ran far deeper than just the affair. He had been selling company secrets to competitors, using the profits to fund a lavish lifestyle, including regular trips with Patricia to private villas in the Mediterranean. Their affair wasn't a recent development either. Bank records showed shared accounts dating back 3 years. Patricia's role was perhaps the most insidious. She had methodically gathered compromising information on board members, building a blackmail portfolio that would have given her control of the company once Lawrence was ousted. She used her position as his wife to access sensitive information, build relationships, and plant seeds of doubt about his leadership. But the most unexpected revelation came from Sandy, his sister-in-law. Sandy had constructed an entire shadow company built on stolen Sullivan Technologies patents, preparing to launch competing products the moment Lawrence was removed from power. "Sir," Chris said, returning with another set of files. "We've confirmed the timing. The dress tonight wasn't just inappropriate. They're celebrating. The merger announcement was supposed to mark the beginning of your end. They think they've won," Lawrence replied coolly, his gaze drifting to the window that overlooked the sleeping city. In the reflection, he saw the monitors behind him, with Patricia and Herman sharing another intimate moment, Guillermo shaking hands with investors, and Sandy watching it all with a satisfied look. "Activate Protocol Zero," Lawrence said, his voice carrying the absolute finality of someone who had already made their decision. Chris hesitated. "Sir, Protocol Zero. The collateral damage will be extensive. Personal reputations, careers, families. They chose their fate when they targeted my children. Lawrence cut him off, his tone unwavering. Lawrence turned back to face Chris, his face illuminated by the city lights and the glow of the monitors. They didn't just try to steal my company. They tried to steal my legacy, execute Protocol Zero. Now, through the cameras, Lawrence could still see Patricia, laughing with Herman, their hands touching under tables, their confidence complete. They had no idea that Lawrence Sullivan hadn't just planned for cyber attacks. He had planned for everything. The first phase of Protocol Zero began at midnight. A cascade of encrypted locks on company data, phantom account transfers, and the quiet activation of hidden contract clauses that trapped millions in legal limbo. By the time Patricia danced with Herman to what they thought was their victory song, Lawrence had already seized control of every shell company they had created. His most trusted assistant, Brooke, worked silently in an adjacent office, gathering evidence and securing his children's futures. Mandy, away at a friend's house, had already been contacted and protected. Bill's college accounts were transferred to secure trusts beyond Patricia's reach. Lawrence watched the final pieces fall into place, remembering Patricia's earlier words. "Maybe I want to feel beautiful for once." To him, she had never looked uglier, draped over Herman, plotting his destruction. The red dress she had intended to mark her triumph would now become the symbol of her downfall. As Lawrence made his final preparations, Dawn approached him. While Patricia celebrates her imagined victory, Dawn said, "Divorce papers are being delivered to the house, along with evidence of her crimes, carefully distributed to select board members." Lawrence nodded. Patricia thought she had deceived him, but the man she had tried to destroy, Lawrence Sullivan, the man who had built an empire on seeing patterns others missed, was very much alive and very, very angry. The night of the gala wouldn't be remembered as the beginning of Lawrence Sullivan's downfall. Instead, it would mark the start of the most meticulously planned revenge in Silicon Valley history. As the music pulsed through the grand ballroom of the St. Regis, Lawrence's plan unfolded with mechanical precision. In the building's secure server room, Lawrence's team of cybersecurity experts carried out a series of intricate protocols that would seal the fate of the conspirators. Lines of code flashed across screens as military-grade encryption was applied to the company's data. Carefully constructed algorithms began to transfer millions into phantom accounts. Through the surveillance feeds, Lawrence observed Patricia twirling in Herman's arms, her red dress a striking contrast against the white marble floor. Neither of them noticed the brief loss of signal on their phones, the moment when their access to the shell company's accounts was severed for good. "Sir, Phase 1 is complete," reported his lead IT specialist. "All offshore accounts have been redirected. The phantom protocols are active." Lawrence nodded, his face bathed in the blue glow of the monitors. True to the stipulations in the contract, Brooke, his executive assistant of 8 years, worked methodically at her station. She had been gathering evidence for months, spotting discrepancies in board meeting minutes and irregularities in company communications. Now, she was ensuring every crucial document was properly secured and backed up on servers only accessible to Lawrence. "Mr. Sullivan," Brooke said, glancing up from her screen, "Mandy is secure. The security team confirmed she's chosen to leave with you. She's quite angry about what her mother did." A brief flash of emotion flickered across Lawrence's face, the first sign of feeling he had shown all night. His daughter, Mandy, had inherited his analytical mind. Once presented with the evidence of Patricia's manipulation, altered text messages, staged conflicts, and the deliberate sabotage of father-daughter events, Mandy made her decision with a clarity that left no room for doubt. "And Bill?" Lawrence asked. "The trust is established and funded. His college accounts are secured. He's protected, sir, though he doesn't know everything yet. We thought it best to wait until after his finals." Lawrence turned to Chris, who stood quietly by the door. "Begin Phase 2. While Patricia continued to dance, blissfully unaware of the storm brewing around her, Lawrence's team executed a series of meticulously timed operations. All company data was locked behind newly implemented encryption protocols. Millions of assets were legally rerouted through predetermined channels. Hidden clauses in contracts were triggered, giving Lawrence control over the shell companies. Emergency board protocols were activated, temporarily consolidating power in the CEO position. Surveillance data was secured and backed up to multiple locations, each more secure than the last. By midnight, as Patricia sipped champagne with her co-conspirators, Lawrence had already regained control of every asset they had thought to steal. The irony of their celebration wasn't lost on him. They were toasting to their own downfall. The divorce papers are being delivered now, Brooke confirmed, along with selected evidence packages to key board members. Lawrence straightened his tie, his voice calm yet firm. Distribute the remaining files as planned. It's time. Before dawn broke over San Francisco, Lawrence Sullivan, the man they believed they had outsmarted, vanished without a trace. His disappearance was as meticulously orchestrated as everything else he had done. No trace, no trail, no loose ends. Patricia's return home would be the first shock of her new reality. She would find all the accounts either emptied or frozen. Divorce papers detailing her infidelity and her involvement in the conspiracy would be waiting for her. Evidence of her crimes would be in the hands of key board members. Her access to company resources would be entirely revoked. Her carefully constructed world was beginning to unravel. The first cracks appeared at dawn. Herman Black stood in his private office, staring at his computer screen in disbelief. Every offshore account he had relied upon was now empty. Years of hidden funds had vanished. His phone buzzed with constant alerts. Access denied. Transfer failed. Account suspended. What the hell is happening? He barked into his phone, his composure shattered. Fix this. But there was nothing to fix. The money hadn't been stolen. It had been legally reclaimed through a network of contracts and clauses so complex that even his lawyers were struggling to understand them. Across town, Guillermo Sullivan watched as federal auditors entered his department, carrying boxes of documents, detailed records of every ghost project, every fraudulent transaction, every fake research initiative he had used to embezzle millions. He attempted to call his sister-in-law, Sandy, but his call went straight to voicemail. Sandy had her own set of problems. Her parallel company, built on stolen patents from Sullivan Technologies, was facing not only litigation but total obliteration. Emergency injunctions had frozen her assets. Cease and desist orders arrived in a relentless stream. Her technical team reported that critical data had simply vanished. But it was Jared Norton, the veteran tech executive, who broke first. Recognizing a lost cause when he saw one, he reached out to federal investigators with an offer: evidence of Patricia's involvement in industrial espionage in exchange for immunity. His betrayal was swift, complete, and entirely self-serving, exactly what Lawrence had anticipated. Patricia's downfall was particularly spectacular. Her society circle, once eager to bask in her attention, now refused to return her calls. Claudia Martinez, Lawrence's corporate counsel and a respected figure in San Francisco society, spearheaded the social exodus. The same people who had admired Patricia's red dress at the gala now whispered about her disgrace at charity events. "I don't know what you're talking about," Herman declared publicly when asked about their relationship. Mrs. Sullivan was simply another board member's wife. "These accusations are ridiculous." He threw her under the bus with such speed it left skid marks. Watching him deny their affair on live television, Patricia finally realized the truth. She had been played for a fool, not by Lawrence, but by her own co-conspirators. Time, however, became Lawrence's greatest ally. While his enemies had expected immediate destruction, he delivered something far more devastating: a slow, methodical dismantling of their lives. Like a master chess player, Lawrence had set up moves that would play out over years. Guillermo's downfall came first. Over the course of 18 months, Lawrence's algorithms orchestrated a series of market crashes that appeared to be mere misfortune. Each crash targeted his brother's remaining investments with surgical precision. By the end of the second year, Guillermo Sullivan, once a millionaire executive, was forced to sell his house just to cover basic expenses. "It's just bad luck," Guillermo told his wife, staring at another margin call notice. "The market's volatile," he muttered, but it wasn't luck. It was Lawrence, operating through layers of shell companies and proxies, using his brother's own greed against him. Every time Guillermo thought he'd found a safe investment, invisible hands subtly shifted the market, just enough to destroy him. Sandy's destruction took longer, but proved even more thorough. Her company survived the first wave of patent lawsuits, but then things began to unravel. Critical servers failed at pivotal moments. Potential clients received anonymous tips about security vulnerabilities. Mysterious cyber attacks exposed just enough of her stolen technology to scare investors away. There's nothing linking these incidents, her security team reported. It's like we're cursed. 3 years later, Sandy's company collapsed under the weight of relentless litigation and technical failures. She was soon blacklisted by the industry. No one would hire an executive with such a tarnished record. Herman's reputation was destroyed piece by piece. Evidence of his numerous affairs, not just with Patricia, but with several other women, leaked to the press in a steady stream. Each revelation was more damaging than the last. His attempts to deny the allegations only worsened his situation, especially when timestamped videos surfaced to contradict his denials. "I assure you, these allegations are completely false," he would say, only for new photos to appear the following day, showing exactly what he had just denied. Patricia, meanwhile, failed at every attempt to access Lawrence's fortune. Each legal challenge was met with overwhelming evidence of her crimes. Her lawyers quit one after another as new conflicts of interest emerged. When she tried to sell stories to the press, journalists received proof of her lies instead. While his enemies floundered, Lawrence quietly rebuilt. Operating under various aliases and through multiple corporations, he constructed a new empire. His children flourished under his guidance. Mandy discovered her talent for cybersecurity, eventually becoming one of the rising stars in the field. Bill excelled in corporate law, his understanding of business deepened by witnessing his father's strategic brilliance. Both children understood the truth. Their father hadn't run away. He had removed them from a toxic environment. Lawrence maintained flawless operational security throughout it all. For 6 years, not once did his enemies discover his whereabouts or new identity. He observed them through surveillance networks, tracking their futile attempts to recover, and systematically closed every door they tried to open. His new corporation grew steadily but quietly, absorbing vulnerable assets from the failed ventures of his former adversaries. Each acquisition was legitimate, logical, and completely untraceable to him. He wasn't simply dismantling their present. He was using their resources to build his future. The conspirators never realized that the assets they had once relied upon were being used against them. They were too consumed with mere survival. Guillermo found himself taking increasingly desperate consulting jobs. Sandy moved into progressively smaller apartments. Herman's reputation became so toxic that even startups wouldn't consider him. Patricia's attempts to reclaim her former social status were met with repeated embarrassments. Through it all, Lawrence operated with mechanical precision. Every move was calculated, every consequence meticulously measured. His actions weren't driven by emotion or revenge. They were cold, deliberate, and required immense patience and planning. He wasn't just destroying lives. He was building something greater, a legacy that would demonstrate once and for all that betrayal never pays. For 6 years, he remained a ghost in the machine, the invisible hand of justice. His enemies, meanwhile, constantly looked over their shoulders, flinched at every shadow, and slowly descended into madness, unable to comprehend why everything they touched turned to dust. But Lawrence knew something they didn't. This was only the prelude. The real endgame was still to come. The security cameras captured Patricia's arrival at 9:47 a.m. 6 years had not been kind to her. Gone were the designer clothes, replaced by off-the-rack garments that tried too hard to appear expensive. Her once perfect hair now had streaks of gray, and her makeup couldn't quite conceal the bitterness etched into her face. She was clutching the hand of a small boy, no older than 5, dark-haired, with Herman's unmistakable nose. The child looked around nervously as Patricia approached the front desk of the towering glass building that housed Nova Technologies, Lawrence's new empire, built from the ashes of his enemies' failed ambitions. "I need to see Lawrence Sullivan," Patricia announced, her voice still carrying the entitled tone she'd used at the gala 6 years ago. "Tell him his wife is here." The receptionist, already briefed for this moment, responded with practiced neutrality. "I'm sorry, ma'am. There's no Lawrence Sullivan here." "Ex-wife," Patricia corrected, fumbling through her purse. "And I know he's here. This building, this company, it's all his. The boy, he needs to meet his father." The security cameras tracked their movements through the lobby. In his office, 60 floors above, Lawrence watched the entire scene unfold on his monitors. DNA test results were already open on his tablet, tests he had arranged months ago through his surveillance network. The boy's genetic profile appeared next to Herman's, showing a 99.9% match. "She's getting desperate," Chris observed from his position by the door. "Trying to claim paternity after 6 years? Lawrence's lips curled slightly. "Herman knows about the boy. He abandoned them both 3 years ago. My sources confirmed he's been dodging child support through shell companies. The trust you set up for the kid has been covering their basic needs," Chris added. "Though Patricia's been neglecting him, despite the support. We have documentation of missed doctor's appointments and unexplained absences from school." Lawrence nodded. Everything was unfolding exactly as he had predicted. Patricia's attempt to exploit a non-existent paternity claim would become just another weapon in his arsenal. His assistant's voice crackled through the intercom. "Mrs. Black is becoming insistent." Lawrence pressed a button, and the security footage revealed Patricia growing increasingly agitated in the lobby. "Tell Lawrence that Thomas is his son," she demanded, her voice rising. "We were together that last night before he disappeared. He has responsibilities." The boy, Thomas, recoiled from his mother's outburst, displaying an all-too-familiar weariness with her tantrums. Lawrence's surveillance had captured dozens of similar scenes. Patricia's public breakdowns, her neglect of the child, and her repeated attempts to use him as leverage against both Herman and Lawrence. "Show them up," Lawrence commanded. "It's time to end this particular charade." 10 minutes later, Patricia stormed into his office, dragging Thomas behind her. She froze when she saw Lawrence behind his desk, looking barely any older than the day he had vanished. Success had preserved him, while failure had ravaged her. "You've been here all along," she whispered, eyes wide in disbelief. "Right under our noses." "Sit down, Patricia," Lawrence said calmly. "We need to discuss Thomas's future. Specifically, why you've been neglecting the child support payments that Herman's sister Ronnie sends for him." Patricia's face drained of color. "How did you?" "I've been watching," Lawrence replied. "I've watched you waste the support money on failed get-rich-quick schemes. I've documented every missed parent-teacher conference, every skipped medical checkup, every time you left him alone while you chased dead-end leads trying to find my fortune." He turned his tablet toward her, displaying the DNA results. "Thomas isn't mine, Patricia, but unlike his actual father, I've been ensuring he has food, shelter, and education through the trust one established. The same trust you've been misappropriating," Lawrence continued, his tone cold. "You can't prove that," Patricia stammered, but Lawrence interrupted. "I can prove everything." With a press of a button, screens around the office flickered to life, displaying surveillance footage, financial records, and medical reports. The question is, what happens next? Meanwhile, Thomas, forgotten by his mother in her shock, had wandered toward a corner of the office, where a familiar red dress hung framed. He stared at it with innocent curiosity, while Patricia's last desperate gambit crumbled around her. A week later, 5 separate town cars arrived at Nova Technologies headquarters, each carrying a passenger who had received an invitation they couldn't refuse. Herman Black emerged first, his designer suit now a poor imitation of his former wardrobe. Bankruptcy had left him desperate, yet he knew he was walking into a trap. Guillermo Sullivan followed, now dressed in the uniform of a middle manager at a security company. 6 years of orchestrated financial crashes had stripped him of everything except bitter resentment. Sandy stepped out next, clutching a briefcase filled with legal papers regarding her impending criminal charges. Her confident stride had given way to nervous glances over her shoulder. Jared Norton arrived fourth, his immunity deal crumbling under the weight of new evidence. His usual swagger was absent, replaced by the haunted expression of a man whose lies were unraveling. Patricia entered last, still reeling from the collapse of her paternity claim. That morning, she had received custody papers. Herman's sister was suing for custody of Thomas, armed with extensive evidence of neglect. The lobby directory displayed their destination: Conference Room A, special board meeting. None of them noticed that every guard, every receptionist, every person they passed had been handpicked for this day. Lawrence watched them approach on his monitors. Beside him stood his inner circle, each member prepared for their role. Mandy, now 24, had become a formidable cybersecurity expert. Her tablets displayed years of surveillance data documenting her mother's activities. Bill, fresh from law school, held files outlining every crime committed by Guillermo. His uncle's betrayal had shaped his deep understanding of corporate law. Brooke, now COO, carried evidence of Sandy's corporate espionage. Every stolen patent, every clandestine deal, every hidden transaction. Chris, standing by the door, was ready to present proof of Herman's many betrayals. Claudia Martinez, a seasoned corporate counsel, stood ready with the documentation of their collective conspiracy. The conspirators entered the conference room one by one, each avoiding eye contact with the others. The room had been intentionally designed. A long table, lined with high-backed chairs, faced a massive screen, currently dark. "Please be seated," a familiar voice commanded through the hidden speakers. The screen flickered to life, revealing Lawrence in his office. But before anyone could react, the conference room doors opened. The real Lawrence walked in. The screen had been a misdirection, a final reminder of how easily they'd been manipulated. 6 years, Lawrence said, settling into the chair at the head of the table. 6 years of watching you destroy yourselves with your own greed and stupidity. "You bastard." Herman started to rise, but Chris's hand on his shoulder forced him back down. "Interesting choice of words, Herman," Lawrence remarked, his tone cool. "Especially considering you abandoned your own son." Patricia flinched, and Guillermo's security guard uniform suddenly seemed too tight. Sandy's fingers trembled around her briefcase. "This isn't about revenge," Lawrence continued. "It's about justice, consequences, and truth." He nodded to his team. Mandy was the first to step forward, her tablet projecting images onto the screen. "Mother, would you like to explain these recordings?" she asked. Her voice echoed in the room, presenting evidence of Patricia's manipulations, carefully orchestrated conflicts, poison aimed at Lawrence's relationship with his children. Patricia's face drained of color as her own voice filled the room, betraying her actions. Bill followed, addressing his uncle. "Uncle Guillermo, the federal authorities are very interested in these transaction records, but they're especially keen on what you did with the money." One by one, each team member presented their evidence. Brooke exposed Sandy's corporate espionage, including emails proving she had stolen patents before they were even filed. Chris outlined Herman's many betrayals, backing it up with surveillance footage of meetings with competitors. Claudia laid bare the conspiracy, connecting each person's actions to show the complete picture of betrayal. But it was Lawrence's final revelation that shattered any remaining hope. "Your immunity deal, Jared," Lawrence said, turning toward Norton. "Did you really think I wouldn't find the evidence you held back? The real records of your involvement?" Norton's face turned ashen. His immunity deal had been contingent on full disclosure, and the evidence Lawrence presented now proved he had lied to federal investigators. The justice Lawrence had orchestrated was falling into place, each revelation a carefully timed domino, toppling the next. Herman was the first to crack. When confronted with Chris's evidence of his corporate fraud, not just the affair with Patricia, but years of selling company secrets, his facade crumbled. "I want to make a deal," he blurted out, only to be met with disgusted glares from the others. "The time for deals is over," Lawrence responded, his voice cold. "Federal agents are already processing your involvement in industrial espionage. The evidence has been verified by 3 independent sources." Guillermo attempted a different tactic. "Brother, please. You lost the right to call me brother when you chose to steal from your own family," Lawrence cut him off. "However, the DA is willing to discuss a plea deal if you testify fully." Guillermo's shoulders slumped. The security guard uniform he wore now felt like a preview of his future prison attire. Within an hour, he had signed a full confession, detailing every ghost project and every stolen dollar. Sandy's collapse was more dramatic. As Brooke methodically presented the evidence of her corporate espionage, Sandy's industry contacts were simultaneously receiving documentation of her crimes. By sunset, she would be blacklisted from every major tech company in the country. "You can't do this," Sandy whispered. But her protests fell flat, even to her own ears. "I already have," Lawrence replied. "Your new company's assets are being seized as we speak. The patents you stole are being returned to their rightful owners." Jared Norton's immunity deal unraveled under the weight of the newly revealed evidence. His attempt to betray his co-conspirators had backfired. Lawrence had known about his hidden records all along, waiting for the perfect moment to expose them. "The federal prosecutors are particularly interested in the evidence you conveniently forgot to mention," Lawrence said. "Immunity deals require full disclosure, Jared. You should have read the fine print." But it was Patricia's fate that felt most fitting. As the others faced their legal repercussions, Patricia watched helplessly as her last attempts to claim Lawrence's fortune vanished. Every effort she'd made over the past 6 years to access his wealth was exposed for the desperate, grasping maneuver it had been. "The boy!" She tried one last time. "Thomas needs stability," Lawrence interrupted. "Which is why I'm supporting Ronnie's custody petition. Herman's sister has proven to be the only adult in his life who truly cares for his well-being." The resolution moved with swift efficiency. Herman was led away by federal agents, his corporate fraud charges carrying a minimum 10-year sentence. Guillermo signed his plea deal, agreeing to a lesser sentence in exchange for his testimony. Sandy could only watch in helplessness as her industry contacts abandoned her, her reputation destroyed beyond repair. Jared's immunity deal was officially revoked, multiple indictments following within hours. Patricia's final attempt to lay claim to Lawrence's assets was swiftly dismissed. Her appeal was denied with prejudice. But Lawrence wasn't finished. As his enemies met their fates, his attention turned to the innocent caught in their web. Thomas, Herman's abandoned son, was placed in Ronnie's custody. Lawrence made sure the boy had everything he needed: education, support, and most importantly, stability. The trust he had established would guarantee that Thomas never suffered for the sins of his parents. "Your actions forced me to destroy your world," Lawrence told the assembled conspirators. "But unlike you, I protect the innocent. Thomas will have every opportunity you tried to steal from my own children." As security escorted them away, Lawrence stood at his office window, watching the sun set over his rebuilt empire. Behind him hung the red dress that had set everything in motion. No longer a symbol of betrayal, it now served as a reminder of justice served. 1 year later, Lawrence sat in that same office, surveying what his vengeance had built. The company was stronger than ever. Mandy led the cybersecurity division, her insights shaped by her father's strategic brilliance. Bill ran the legal department, his understanding of corporate law deepened by documenting his uncle's crimes. Brooke served as COO, her loyalty rewarded with the position she'd earned. Chris directed global security operations, extending his protectiveness to the entire Sullivan empire. Claudia's position as chief corporate counsel remained untouchable, her handling of the conspirators' downfall legendary in legal circles. Meanwhile, the conspirators lived with their consequences. Herman served his time in federal prison, his corporate fraud conviction ensuring that he would never work in business again. His appeals fell flat, each rejection citing the overwhelming evidence against him. Guillermo worked night shifts as a security guard. His plea deal left him with just enough freedom to survive, but not enough to thrive. His former wealth and status were nothing but bitter memories. Sandy lived in a small apartment on the outskirts of the city, blacklisted from the corporate world. Once a master of her domain, her attempts to rebuild her reputation met with closed doors and refusals. Jared faced multiple indictments. His legal troubles mounted as more evidence of his deception came to light. His collapsed immunity deal set off a chain reaction of legal consequences. Patricia, her social status destroyed, worked as a retail clerk in a mall department store. Her former friends crossed the street to avoid her, and her repeated attempts to rebuild her social standing failed. Her name had become synonymous with betrayal in San Francisco society. The red dress remained in Lawrence's office, framed behind bulletproof glass. It served as a reminder that true justice required not just vengeance, but wisdom. His new wife, Amanda Troy, who had helped expose the financial threads of the conspiracy, understood its significance. Their blended family, including Thomas, whom Lawrence mentored with care, represented his true victory. Lawrence had learned that revenge wasn't just about punishment. It was about protecting the innocent and ensuring that karma found its rightful targets. As he watched his family and loyal friends celebrating the company's anniversary, Lawrence understood that the best revenge wasn't simply destroying his enemies. It was about building something stronger from the ashes of their betrayal. The power of a patient, calculated response to treachery had proven absolute. Every character's fate felt earned, every resolution complete, every loyalty rewarded. Justice, served cold and thoroughly, had prevailed. Epilogue: Patricia Black, formerly Sullivan, stared at her reflection in the employee bathroom mirror of Carson's department store. At 52, maintaining her appearance had become an obsession, a desperate attempt to hold onto a glory long lost. The employee discount barely covered the basics. Cosmetics she couldn't afford, essentials she hadn't been able to maintain. Her monthly paycheck as a sales clerk barely sustained even a fraction of her former lifestyle. Her studio apartment, a far cry from the Sullivan mansion, sat above a Chinese restaurant in a forgotten corner of San Francisco. The persistent smell of cooking oil served as a daily reminder of her fall. Her wedding rings, both from Lawrence and her brief, disastrous marriage to Herman, had been sold years ago to cover her mounting legal fees. Every attempt she made to rebuild her social standing had ended in failure. 3 charity organizations had publicly rejected her applications to volunteer. Former friends blocked her calls and social media accounts. Country clubs cited membership restrictions when she tried to join. Even her mother's bridge club had quietly asked her not to attend their annual fundraiser. Her relationship with Thomas, now 11, was limited to court-mandated supervised visits twice a month. Ronnie, Herman's sister, had gained full custody 5 years earlier, supported by Lawrence's meticulous documentation of Patricia's neglect. The trust Lawrence had set up ensured Thomas attended the best schools and had every opportunities Patricia could no longer even pretend to provide. Herman Black's fate was equally fitting. Federal prison camp Montgomery had stripped him of both his arrogance and his freedom. His 7-year sentence, reduced from 10 for his cooperation, gave him ample time to reflect on the choices he had made. Ironically, his cellmate was a former hedge fund manager who had lost everything to one of Lawrence's market corrections. The consequences of their betrayal continued to unfold. Patricia's attempts to write a tell-all book were shut down by the ironclad NDAs she had signed. Herman's appeals were rejected with increasing finality. Their joint assets had been seized and liquidated. Their reputations were so thoroughly destroyed that even their failures went unnoticed in the press. Meanwhile, Lawrence's new headquarters dominated the San Francisco skyline, a symbol of patient revenge and strategic reconstruction. Nova Technologies' logo gleamed in the morning sun, while inside, the fruits of loyalty flourished. Mandy Sullivan, now strategic director of cybersecurity, had turned her father's security protocols into an industry standard. Her department's innovations, born from watching Lawrence's methodical dismantling of his enemies, consistently set new benchmarks in digital protection. At 29, industry publications were already calling her the next generation of cybersecurity evolution. Bill Sullivan's legal department had become legendary for its precision. His deep understanding of corporate law, shaped by documenting his uncle's downfall, made him uniquely qualified to protect the company's interests. His recent marriage to the daughter of a Supreme Court justice had further strengthened the Sullivan legacy. Brooke's promotion to COO reflected Lawrence's knack for spotting talent. Her management style, learned from years of observing him, blended efficiency with strategic insight. The board's unanimous support for her leadership was reflected in the company's strongest quarter in history. Chris expanded global security into an independent subsidiary, offering specialized services to select clients. His loyalty to Lawrence was rewarded with partial ownership of the new venture, though he continued to personally oversee the Sullivan family security. Claudia Martinez held the position of chief corporate counsel, with a corner office offering a view of the bay. Her handling of the conspirators' downfall had become a case study at top law schools, though the full details remained sealed. Lawrence's marriage to Amanda Troy brought more than personal happiness. It united two powerful families, combining their complementary strengths. Her financial expertise had been crucial in tracing the conspiracy's money trails, and her personal experience with loss, having lost her first husband to the conspirators' machinations, gave her unique insight into Lawrence's motivations. Their blended family thrived. Amanda's teenage daughters excelled under Mandy's mentorship, and Thomas, though not officially part of the family, received careful, structured guidance. The Sullivan name once again represented integrity and innovation, and their regular family dinners became a symbol of victory over betrayal. The company's success far exceeded Lawrence's initial calculations. Nova Technologies absorbed key markets from competitors, strategic acquisitions bolstered their global position, innovation patents secured their technological leadership, and stock values tripled under the new leadership. Lawrence maintained discreet surveillance on his former enemies, not out of fear or obsession, but as a matter of principle. Their continuing struggles served as data points in his understanding of justice. Patricia's attempts at redemption failed. Interviews for better positions were unsuccessful. Loan applications were rejected, and her attempts to contact Thomas outside the approved visits were blocked. Her submissions to society magazines about her side of the story were declined. Herman's prison life declined his requests for parole, his attempts to publish business insights were rejected, and his appeals for a sentence reduction were denied. His growing isolation reflected the abandonment of all his former contacts. The red dress, still framed in Lawrence's office, had taken on almost mythical status among the employees. New hires quickly learned not to ask about it directly, but the story behind it, in carefully curated versions, circulated as a cautionary tale about betrayal and loyalty. Lawrence's revenge hadn't merely destroyed his enemies. It had transformed it into a lasting lesson. It had given rise to something far greater, a corporate culture that placed loyalty above all else, a family strengthened by overcoming betrayal, a legacy secured for future generations, and a reputation for unwavering, absolute justice. Thomas, unaware of the full extent of his connection to the events that had shaped his life, thrived under Ronnie's care. The trust Lawrence had established ensured that he would have every opportunity to build his own legacy, free from the shadow of his parents' choices. In the end, Lawrence's patient vengeance had turned betrayal into the very foundation for a stronger future. The fates of the conspirators stood as a perpetual reminder. Karma does not strike like lightning. Instead, it rises like the tide, slow but inevitable, consuming those who mistake patience for weakness. The Sullivan name endured, stronger than ever, while those who had sought to destroy it lived on as cautionary tales. Their falls were as complete as their betrayals had been deep. Lawrence kept just one photo from his previous marriage, not for sentimentality, but for perspective. It was an image of Patricia in the red dress at the gala, celebrating what she thought was her triumph. Beside it, quarterly reports illustrated Nova Technologies' continuing dominance, each success another building block in the empire forged from his enemy's destruction. Perfect revenge, Lawrence had learned, was never simply about obliterating one's enemies. It was about using their ruin to create something they could never soil, never touch, and never truly understand. A legacy of justice, served cold, complete, and without regret.